Hello, I'm Cheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. Colorism, the preference for light skin over dark skin, has been with us for centuries. But lately, there's been a renewed discussion of colorism and the impact it has on our daily lives. Where did this obsession with the shade of one's skin come from? Why does it persist? Is it a worldwide phenomenon? And what, if anything, can be done to counter its damaging effects? Here to address these issues is Professor Vanessa Valdez, Director of the Black Studies Program at the City College of New York. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Vanessa, as you know, in a widely publicized interview with Oprah recently, Prince Harry's wife, Meghan Markle, recently revealed that before their son was born, some members of the royal family engaged in speculation over how dark the baby's skin might turn out to be. And this seems to have provoked a huge public reaction. People questioning, is the royal family racist? What is all this about? Some people claim to be shocked by this revelation. Were you?
No, I don't. I think about, a monarchy that is built upon, imperialism and colonialism and the suppression of peoples of color. Yeah, I think that was par for the course, actually, when you had the first royal of color in the 21st century giving birth. I think that was almost to be expected, actually.
Now, your students, you told me the other day that you had several conversations, several classes in which your students discussed this very actively. What did your students have to say about this?
So it went in various places. One of them, there was conversations about colorism, in particular, the idea that a woman as light as Meghan Markle could be on the receiving ends of such treatment. There was conversation about, well, what if she were darker? Would she have even been allowed to have married him? Would she have been attractive to him? All of those, yeah. And then there was conversations about, why is this so surprising, given that as peoples of color, we do this to ourselves as well, right? And so I teach a Caribbean music class, and in that conversation, students were like, we do this. What do you mean? Like, we perpetuate this. So why is this so shocking? And so there were lots of different levels to the conversations that were happening.
My reaction was similar to some of your students. You're like, what's the big deal? That because speculation over an unborn baby's skin color, when you have a multiracial couple, would probably occur in many, if not most, families. Whether they were British royals, whether they were British commoners, whether they were American whites, African Americans, West Indians, Asians, because people feel that skin color matters. And I don't mean just because you are technically either belong to a certain group, Black, white, or Asian, but how dark or how light your skin is, that it matters. Why does it matter?
I mean, within the context of that conversation, I'd like to remember, I have to remind myself that it was also in relation to security status for her child, right? It wasn't just that how dark this child would be, but also he's not going to be designated a prince, he's not going to have security. And I think from their perspective, it was a question of safety, right? And the idea of like, wait, the first child of color, because her mother, that child's mother saying, irrespective of what shade that child comes out, still going to be a child of color from her perspective, right? The baby wasn't born yet. Why it matters is because, there are legacies of colonialism and imperialism that were dominated by European powers, as you said in your introduction, for centuries. With those conquests came less tangible things, right? So for example, here in the Western Hemisphere, or at least this side of the Atlantic, we are more familiar with legacies of enslavement, right? Well, proximity to whiteness, literal proximity to whiteness, and actual, relationships with the enslavers often meant freedom. I mean, for women that were involved with enslavers, the children that were born, I mean, that was a key way of obtaining freedom in various systems. And
Or other privileges, whether you worked in the big house or whether you worked in the fields, whether you might be freed one day or remain a slave for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Correct?
And again, like in other, with, for my students, I always emphasize, because we have a North American context, I said, this is not just a British thing, right? The Spanish held, the Spanish held territories, large territories, the Danish, the Dutch, the Portuguese, like this was a grand thing. This is a huge multinational business, is what enslavement was. And with those came, all of those differing systems of freedom obtaining, that Black peoples did for themselves. But it was navigating all of that. And so, yes, proximity of the whiteness meant, people would leave houses to their descendants, right? And more often than not, those were the lighter skinned, right, descendants than the darker skins. And so we see those legacies are real, and they play out to this day.
Also, just the stereotypes that attach to certain shades of color, because slavery and colonialism was justified by arguing that people who were dark-skinned were inferior, that they were lazy, that they were immoral, they were not as intelligent, whereas people who were light-skinned were more intelligent, more moral, capable of more things. So that's really so it's that racism, that's inherent in colonialism and slavery that still attaches. And even now, if you look at how skin color plays out in our everyday lives, research has shown that the hue of your skin can affect your ability to get a job, how much you get paid, who you marry, whether you marry at all. Dark-skinned women are much less likely to get, brown-skinned women are much less likely to marry than lighter-skinned women. It determines how, as children, you get treated in school, whether you get disciplined and expelled and suspended and all of that. It, dark-skinned people who've been convicted of murdering white people are more likely to get the death penalty than lighter-skinned people who are convicted of murdering white people. And certainly whether we are presumed to be intelligent, honest, and industrious really is often attached to the shade of our skin. So is colorism, is it a worldwide phenomenon? We know it exists here in the United States. We know it exists, so like in the West Indies where there was slavery. Is it a worldwide phenomenon?
It is a worldwide phenomenon. And it is one that is, again, I tell my students, here in New York City, you can go to any ethnic store, right, that sells, like many of the enclaves that are here, where they have both grocery store and then they sell like the beauty products, there's always bleaching creams or soaps or, things to make yourself, and that's across the board. And so, again, the reality of the insidiousness of the myth of white supremacy, right? The idea that, again, whiteness is all of the things that you just said. And therefore, if we can get as close to that as possible, right? Even if it means bleaching our skin, even if it means, it goes into things like when we're talking about hair, when we're talking about surgery, when we're talking about, contact lenses, right? All the things that people have tried to do. And again, these are historical phenomenons, right? Like we think of it in the current day. But, under the Spanish Empire, for example, people could purchase certificates of whiteness, right? They could have been two generations of blackness, and then they would be like, no, 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 they would wipe out that blackness if they were ascending a social ladder, if they were marrying into
Mhm.
you know, an upper, like someone higher up in the social strata, right? And so little details like that, and under the different empires, I mean, they're absolutely ridiculous, and yet, you know, when we play it out in the present day, I try to ground my students in that kind of material realities, right? This isn't just better than, less than. You think you're better than, less than. This
Right.
is no, people gained money because of that. Continue to do so. So
Now
yeah,
you are of Puerto Rican descent.
of Puerto Rican descent, yes.
How have you seen this play out in your family, in your neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, beginning with, you know, my parents were darker than I am and than my brother is. My mother was mistaken for our nanny, right? Our mother is a beautiful, she's beautiful and coconut brown. And my mother, who was born in Puerto Rico, her, like, our family goes back to at least the 1830s in the same village in the same town in Puerto Rico. And, you know, all Black peoples. Like, so she would do our, you know, carry the, push our stroller near Central Park, and they thought that she was the nanny. Always. That was one way. When we were children, you know, I had another, a lighter skinned Puerto Rican girl tell me that, you know, I wasn't white, and I didn't understand what she was trying to tell me. Like,
Right, right, right.
I mean, she was like, I'm white. And I said, no, you're yellow, because I was trying to attach like the actual color of her skin.
Hmm.
Um, and I didn't understand the values. And that was like when we were 6 or 7 or 8, you know, so yeah, it
Did
plays.
you have people say, don't play in the sun or go play in the sun?
So my, again, my God bless my parents. My mother in particular is like, so yeah, again, we're Black Puerto Rican people. So my mother looks at me like, right about now, like, this right here, this kind of paleness is too much. She's like, please go out, please go
No.
when the sun comes out. So no, if anything, we were encouraged to go tan and be out there. So there
Right.
was never a fear of being dark. Absolutely.
Do you hear from, I know you have Caribbean students, do you hear from them talking about their experiences with colorism, or do they have any particular
Yeah,
take?
I mean, absolutely. Again, with questions, and here's where it gets mixed in with xenophobia, right? Here, the idea of who you date, right, from men and women, and the students in my classes, who are you dating? Who are you messing with? What's too American? What's not American? Particular kinds of American, specifically Black American. Yeah, I mean, all of those things. Like, are you? I have a student. I know a couple, two students that I mentored separately, and then I found out that they were engaged. And one was he was very, very scared of, he wasn't scared, he was nervous about meeting his fiance's family, because he was nervous that they would reject him,
Because he was dark?
because he was dark. Yeah.
He was Caribbean, a Caribbean?
He was no, he's African American. He is of African descent,
Okay,
but second generation here. And
yeah.
so he was concerned about that. And she was and like, you know, they had been together for 2 years. And I
Hmm.
said, "But she loves you," and yet
Right,
he was scared that, like, but what are they going to say about our children?
yeah,
You know.
yeah.
So yeah, again, the concerns that really get heightened when peoples come together and then start, you know, the conversations about children. I mean, you know, for myself, I remember I was in graduate school, and I had I knew someone who was African American from Tupelo, Mississippi, and she looked at me, and her brother was in love with a white woman, and she said, and they came out pregnant. And she looked at me and she said, "What does it feel like to be mulatto?" I said, "What?" I'm
Uh,
sorry. And she was like, "No, because I don't know how to relate to my niece or my nephew to be. So explain to me," you know. And I realized that, you know, she's coming from a US Southern context and was a literature student. So she was more aware of this with the tragic mulatto trope.
right,
And I
right.
was like, I'm sorry, I did not grow
Never
up.
thought of yourself as mulatto.
I don't
So,
invest in that identity.
so we know um, that colorism is related to the legacy of colonialism and racism and slavery that identifies a lot of bad negative traits with people who are darker. But we also, I was talking to somebody the other day, reading that colorism existed in some Asian countries before there was any kind of colonization and where there was no slavery. And that in fact, light skin was considered desirable because it was a marker of higher socioeconomic status. For instance, I was in Vietnam and Cambodia a few years ago, where everybody rides around on motorbikes. And you would notice that the women who are out on motorbikes, it's like 100 degrees outside and the sun is shining, and they're all covered up in these jumpsuits, long sleeve, long pants, big floppy hats, sunglasses. And I'm saying, and I ask about that. And apparently that's because the women don't want to get tan, because light skin is considered, well, certainly a sign of beauty. Lighter skin is a sign of beauty, and also more so of a higher economic status. Right, okay. So it seems to be colorism, it seems to be a function not only just of sort of racism, but also this of elitism.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no. And again, I think, when we look at the history of the United States, that certainly existed here up until about the 1920s, when all of a sudden being tanned came to signify leisure. But prior to that, being tan signified that you were working outside. You were a manual laborer, enslaved or not. And then, in the 20s with like the roaring 20s and, all of a sudden Kellogg and this movement of like health food and all that, that is when it switched. And it meant that like, oh no, you have enough money to be able to go outside and and that it signified health.
When we talk about colorism within certain ethnic groups, I remember when going to Brazil, and in Brazil, which has so many different colors, so many mixtures, you will hear, we are all Brazilians. We do not discriminate. We're all Brazilians. But you notice that the people who lived in the gated communities are lighter skinned, and the people up in the favelas with no money are darker skinned people. Right. Same thing with Cuba, where they say, we are all Cubanos, we are Cuban, we do not discriminate here. But you notice that all of the employees of the hotels, where they get good salaries and good tips, are light-skinned Cubans, where the people selling trinkets out in the park are dark-skinned people. So you have, even among people who say, we are one and we do not discriminate, there's a lot of colorism that goes on.
Yeah, nationality is not something that is equally distributed to everyone. I mean, I think, again, in all of these spaces, in the spaces that you included, there are such things, the categories of Afro-Brazilians, Afro-Cubans, African-Americans, right? Like, and so you have histories of those terms. France is notorious for this. No, everyone is French, period. And French nationality. And they use that to say, that is why, young Muslim women who veil shouldn't veil. They cannot veil. That is illegal because they are less than French, right? If they do that. And I am born and raised in the United States. So from my perspective, the flattening of nationality to mean a homogenous presence that sometimes is not extended to those of darker hues.
Right. And it isn't really true. I mean, there really is a lot of difference in how people of different colors are treated.
Absolutely.
I was talking to a Haitian college professor the other day, and he noted that while a substantial number of white Americans consider themselves liberal, support racial equality, probably take part in some demonstrations, promote Black Lives Matter, but that, this is his number, I didn't check it out or not, but that fewer than 1% of them marry people of color, especially a Black American, so that their actions are really at odds with their beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, like we I was thinking about the fact that every time I talk about I'm in the field of Afro-Latin American studies, right? I'm in Black studies, and my specialty is looking at Black peoples, the histories and art and culture of Black peoples in Latin America, the Caribbean, and here in the United States. And, you know, I am often the darkest person on panels with Latinx scholars, which is ridiculous. And I point it out. And part of that is, again, as you were talking about, what has been described as the push out of folks, of darker skinned students, right, from the school system, right? Higher dropout rates, higher suspension rates, higher expulsion rates. We know that students of color advance in terms of education when faculty identify them as brilliant, for example, right? And so we as educators, it's incumbent upon us to examine our own biases and go, wait, are you only looking at those who look like you, right? And again, the numbers are such that there are a smaller number of darker skinned professors than lighter skinned. That's across ethnic groups and race groups, right? So within Latinx scholars, they're more what they are white presenting than not, right? In Asians, there's more lighter than not. Like the field of African studies is not dominated by African scholars that like
Really?
from the African continent. No,
Okay.
it is not. Like so many of our fields are not. And so, again, to your point about intellectual beliefs, again, we can throw up a hashtag and say Black Lives Matter, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to money, distribution of money, be it hiring practices,
Right.
or kinship and intimacy, right? Who are you loving? Where's your money going? What's happening? That's where we see a person's priorities and a society's priorities when we talk about budgets, for example.
Now, we had talked about, what happens in the Latino communities and somewhat happens in the Caribbean community. I wonder if this is as true among Africans, if that skin color thing plays as big a role in their assessment of themselves. I mean, I was reading someplace that some Africans will tell you, I didn't know I was Black until I got to the United States. That in Africa, I'm just Igbo or Tutsi or Hutu or whatever. In Africa, it's a tribal thing. It's not a racial thing. I don't know if you've noticed.
I think it's also first on that continent with more than 50 countries, I think where it comes down to is sub-Saharan or not. Then it becomes a geographic thing as well, right? Because even in the way that we think about the African continent, we don't think like North Africa is sometimes like separate from, all of those countries, Morocco and such, are separated from the rest of the continent.
Right.
And look, and we think about, sometimes we don't even consider Madagascar or Mauritius or things like that. And then we look at those countries that were, again, heavily colonized, South Africa, Zimbabwe, things, so yeah, I think that it's even more complex, right? And again, that idea of Blackness, our conceptualization of Blackness is also a function of the Middle Passage, because you had peoples from all different ethnicities, speaking all different languages, practicing all different religious traditions, related, but different religious traditions. And they get deliberately mixed.
They're all in the hole together.
That's it. And
right.
And so our conceptualization of Blackness is a result of that.
Yeah.
And so again, as we study, it all calls for a need to actually study like all of these different cultures and see how we, as human beings, classify ourselves and each other.
The real point seems to be the bottom line, that skin color, lighter skin, is part of one's social capital in just about every place in the world. It's part of your social, other things contributing to social capital, your income, your education, but your skin color as well plays a part in that. We know the media plays a role in reinforcing the value of lighter skin, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we see that in, again, if anybody flipping on Spanish television, you would think that there are no Black people speaking Spanish ever, when there are 200 million peoples of African descent in
Mhm.
Latin America and the Caribbean. You would never get that sense. You would think that there are no, many telenovelas are, filmed in Mexico. You would think there are no Black Mexicans. There are Afro Mexicans that have been there for centuries. And here, I look to the work of an Ava DuVernay, of Lena Waithe, of Marseille Martin, right, and Issa Rae, and the casting of, like, not only all hues but dark skinned women and men, right, to say no, no, we are human, we love, we express all the emotions. Yeah, I mean, you have to, I think, in terms of like countering predominant stereotypes and predominant images that we get, we have to look to Black creatives who are conscious of these decisions.
It has been suggested that if we are ever going to confront and defeat racism, then we need to defeat colorism. Do you agree? And is that even possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, it's not, I think sometimes people not confuse, we think of the ability to do something with whether it's easy or not. And it's never been easy, right? I mean, we're really talking about like rooting out deeply held beliefs. And that is something that's all hands on deck situation, in terms of education, law, media, everything, every sector we can think about. And so, yes, it is possible. No, it would not be easy.
Is there any additional research into colorism that you feel needs to be done? Anything that you'd like to know, like people to research?
I mean, I think in general, we are so saturated with negative stereotypes that I would like the focus to be on what peoples do in the recuperation of their histories. I think that's where we need to focus. As the director of a Black Studies program, I teach Black history, and that is eye-opening for my students. And so the continuing recuperation of our histories, our values, our beauties, that which has sustained Black communities throughout the world, that's what's more important to me.
Well, as I said, this is an issue that's been around for centuries, and we're still talking about it. It still affects people's lives, and we still need to address it in, as you said, whatever way we can. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'd like to thank Vanessa Valdez, Director of the Black Studies Program at the City College of the City University of New York, for joining me today. And to learn about our upcoming shows, be sure to follow us on Twitter at One2One CUNY TV. For the City University of New York and One2One, I'm Cheryl McCarthy.